Okay, morning everybody. Let's start today's tutorial. So the first question is like this. The output of a below block is driven by four inputs. All the inputs and output are 1 bit width. The selection of the input is done by two address lines A0, A1 and enable bar. As per the truth table given below, design the block using logic gates. Okay. So essentially this block, have you read what can we call this block? Anybody from our digital class? There are four inputs, and depending on the it's in mux, yeah, it's in mux, and you have an enable pin also. So the enable pin is like it's an uh, enable bar. It's known as enable bar because when it is enable bar is 0, only then the outputs are available. It is going to select any one of them. So we need to design this block, essentially make a multiplexer. So this is how it is done. This is the truth table. So these are just the inverters to show A1 bar and A0 bar, to generate A1 bar and A0 bar, right? And then you have four AND gates, three input gate AND gates. So everywhere you are going to give one of the signals you are going to give is enable, because when enable is 0, enable bar is 0, you need an output. So we have taken the inverted of enable bar, which is enable, which is given to all these AND gates. And then for the four input combinations, for 0 0, the most significant bit, here A bar B bar is the least significant bit, you give D0. And then for A0 and A1 bar, you give D1, and similarly for the all four combinations. Here it is going to be a tri-state buffer. It has to be a buffer. Erroneously it's shown as inverter. It has to be a tri-state buffer, right? These have to be buffers, because outputs of two inverters cannot be shorted to each other. That is why this is a tri-state. Tri-state means if it is an 0, this will be in a high impedance state. So that is the reason we can short these circuits. So this is the way we can implement an multiplexer, right? So in real VLSI circuits these days, so we don't use inverters and AND gates for implementation of mux. We directly implement using MOS transistors, CMOS transistors, which acts like a switch. Like in this case, this is just an example. The enable has not been shown here, but you can insert the enable also. If you have S1 is equal to 0, right, and S2 is equal to 0, right, you will have, see, S1 is coming here. Okay, so in this case it's the other way around, NMOS, right? So S1 bar, if S1 and S2 are 0, if you see this is the S1 bar signal, this transistor will be on, and S2 bar, I think these two transistors, it will D. If you, S1 and these two transistors, NMOS transistors, will be on, so you will have D coming out from here. Okay, these are the NMOS transistors. So these are just acting like an switch. If you see also there is a parallel path out here for D, wherein from PMOS also, like S1 is given here, and S2, S1 and S2. If you see, where is S1 and S2 for D? I think this A is made here, and for A, if you see, it is S1 and S2 for A. Now if I take this A line above here, S1 bar and S2 bar is given here. for the PMOS. Okay, can anybody say why there are two paths available? One for NMOS and one for PMOS. Only one should have been like it is for S1 is equal to 0 and S2 is equal to 0. A is available out. Okay, this is given that way. So if S1 is equal to 0, S1 is equal to 1 and S2 is equal to 1, A will be available here. So these two transistors NMOS will be switched on. But if you see, S1 bar and S2 bar is also given to two PMOS, and the same A is available like this also. So why is it that there is two paths available? Anybody can make a guess?
Sir, for discharging purpose,
Yeah, it is like,
connecting to.
yeah. So you have done microelectronics course?
No, sir.
MEC course is not yet done.
No, sir. Not at least for CS people.
Okay. So it is because that the NMOS transistors, they can transmit zeros pretty well, right? But whereas the PMOS transistors, they can transmit the one very well. So that is why you have these parallel paths available, because there could be a requirement of passing a 0, or there could be a requirement of passing a 1, right? So hence you have an NMOS path as well as a PMOS path. Okay, so that is the reason there is an always a parallel paths. Okay, so this is not part of your syllabus, that's why I marked it in red. So I'm just giving you some practical mux circuits. So it is never implemented like this in an actual circuit. Okay, so for your exam point of view and for your syllabus point of view, these are the kind of circuits which would be asked. But practically these days, this is an optimized version. See, this will require far lesser number of transistors. These AND gates and all have to be implemented with an AND gate, and then you put this. We have done it in our CMOS implementation, right? An AND function. We have done many functions like this. So for in CMOS implementation, you will require 6 transistors for an 3 input function, right? Implementation NAND, and then put one more inverter. This will take 8 transistors, this itself. So 8 into 4, 32 plus all the inverters, and so it will take lot of silicon chip area. So this is the way it is generally implemented. I'm just giving a hint, and which you will probably learn in ADVD or some other course. So this is just to give a rough idea. It will remain in the back of your mind that VLSI chips multiplexers look something like this. Okay, so you don't have to memorize this or try to implement this. So I'm just telling you this is how it looks like. Okay. Now the second problem is a relay is to be operated when whenever X or Y is true, and X is selected if enable X is true, and Y is selected if enable Y is true. At any time only enable X or enable Y will be true. Relay needs 20 milliampere to be operated. Design the circuit to do this function. Okay, so this is the problem. So can anybody make a guess what is the function like, output function?
Sir, XOR of those two, like we need.
So there are actually 4 inputs, right? X, Y,
Like
enable.
we can pair up X and enable X in an AND gate, and similarly for Y and XOR of those two, maybe.
Yeah, Y XOR, it could be an OR also, right?
Or is also fine.
Yeah. Okay. So this is one option, one of the solutions. Yeah, you can do that. Here, if you see Y and enable Y, X and enable Y, it's a NAND gate, and 5 volt is given to the relay. So if you see, if both are 1, this will go 0. So this relay will get a ground. Okay, this relay will get a ground and it will get energized. Similarly, when X and enable X both are 1, it will get a ground from 0. So this is how we can implement. Okay, can anybody see any problem with this circuit? Is there any issue in implementing it like this?
Sir, if like both channels become to be high or low, like in a sense,
Yeah, yeah. If both are high and
both.
low, then there is no problem. But if one is high and one is low, it could become an issue, right?
Okay, for a single line, we will have 0 and 1. Like,
Yeah, yeah. There could be one here, there could be zero here. Then this VDD will become zero, right? So they could be a problem in this. So generally we avoid such kind of circuits unless and until we know there is no problem in connecting these two circuits like this out here. Okay. Again, from exam point of view, or you can do this. Uh, this circuit is again not there in your syllabus as of now, but still I am explaining you this aspect. Right, this is known as an TTL pull-up uh, open collector NAND gate. Okay, TTL gates. Many of the TTL gates are like this. What happens in this case? If you see the circuit is okay. Say if A and B both are high. Okay, both are high. So what happens is these diodes are reverse biased. So you will find VCC is applied through a diode through to this transistor. So Q1 transistor comes on. So if Q1 transistor comes on, Q3 also comes on. So there is a forward bias available for Q2. So here this Q2 will try to sink current. Will try to sink current. Okay. So if you have if either of them is zero, okay, then this VCC there will be current flowing through this diode, and whatever VCC is available that gets dropped across R1. So Q2 is off. If Q2 is off, then Q3 is also off because there is no current coming here. So Q3 is also off. So if it is off, this is like an high impedance state. So in these cases, in this particular TTL gate, there is a possibility you can very well connect the outputs like this. Okay. Essentially it is not that universally you cannot connect the wires of these AND gates. So you can connect the wires also like this. So it becomes an wired OR connection and all. So these you will be able to analyze only if we know how the gates function internally. So we cannot do if these NAND gates are CMOS NAND gates. So you cannot do these kind of wired connections. You will have to put an AND gate and an OR gate. So when we design a circuits, so many a times the circuits becomes very much simplified than what it would appear on pen and paper if we know the internal circuit of these gates, right? So these circuits probably you will study in your next course in MEC or in ADVD. But I just wanted to explain you that when we design these kind of practical circuits, say if you are doing a project or something, so you can, if you open up the specs of these NAND gates, when we see the data sheet, so it will be specified what kind of gate is there inside. So you might be able to do something like this and optimize your design. Okay. So I have explained this particular circuit just so that if somebody is doing some project in your next semester, microprocessor based circuit where you have to drive the output of the microprocessors and do some functions. So if you know the internal circuits of the gates which you are using, you will be able to optimize the design further. So that is the reason I've just introduced you this. I don't have to memorize this circuit excuse me, or remember this for your examination point of view. Okay. So this just an okay. So this is a much safer way of doing it, like we decided. If you connect two AND gate and an OR gate, But then to energize and relay, we are giving an supply voltage on the other end. So we need, whenever our favorable condition is available at the input, you want a zero out here, so that this relay current flows through this relay. So that is the reason you put an instead of an OR, you put an NOR gate. So this is a safe circuit. This would work for irrespective of what family you are using, whether CMOS, TTL. This will never have a problem. It is the safest way of implementing the circuit. You have two AND gates and an OR gate, and you put an. So this you can probably target if some question is asked in your exam. Okay, you can do these kind of circuits. So here it's the safest way of doing it, though it may not be the optimized version. Okay, so is this circuit clear to everybody? Is there any doubts in this?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, can we when we do an actual microprocessor based circuit, okay, not that whatever I speak is directly there for your exam. Okay, maybe whatever I put it in red may not be really applicable for your syllabus point of view. Okay, so they are all extra slides which I have put. So okay, what there could be another problem when you are designing things with your microprocessors, because the current capacity, you will have to take care of the current carrying capacity of the current of the relays. Okay, and in fact the current requirement of the relay to get it operated properly. Okay, that should not be more than what the gates are supposed to give, right? Suppose here in this problem it was given 20 milliamperes. So most of the gates would give around 30 to 40 milliampere. Even Arduino gives every pin 40 milliampere current. So this should not be a problem. But hardly you will get any relay which will operate at just 20 milliamperes. Many relays operate only at 80 milliampere or 100 milliampere. So you cannot drive most of the relays when you design a practical circuit with mere gates like this. Okay, any TTL gate or even a microprocessor cannot directly drive an inductor. So you will have to have an interface unit. So in those cases, like what we do is you have an input and like this, two inputs, and then you have an OR gate, then you put a transistor. So now you can choose a transistor which can drive sufficient current. Okay, so whenever it either this is both are high or this both are high, there will be one here, this transistor will be switched on. Now you can pick up a transistor, you can see the specs, and you can take a transistor which can give huge current, right? So you can have an few, even you have 1 ampere switching transistors and MOS. So that is, then there will not be any limitation on the current which flows into the inductor. So if it requires say 100 milliamperes, so you can select an transistor which can safely provide 100 milliamperes. So this is how we implement a practical circuit. Okay, is it clear, this aspect, why we have put a transistor there? Right, when you go through the specifications in the net, you will find you can pick up any transistor. Okay, so there will be the current carrying capacity of those transistors will be mentioned, right? Okay, but when we are doing it then microprocessor, okay, yeah, even that is not a good option. The best option would be to use an optocoupler. Okay, what does an optocoupler do is the microprocessor just is connected to the input of an optocoupler. This is how an optocoupler looks like, and a very negligible current in microamperes in fact flows from the microprocessor and into an LED. Okay, so this LED, this is a photo, this is an LED, this is a photo detector. Okay, within this it's a photo detector. So the photo detector gets activated. So once this photo detector gets activated, so the current will flow from the 5 volt. You need to give 5 volt supply also to this optocoupler. It will go through this relay, and then it will make a contact. So we can use, so these optocouplers are available for various ratings. Ratings means this the current carrying capacity of this contact, right? So that is available for various ratings, but the input side it will take only in microamperes. So your microprocessor remains really totally immune with the switchings which are happening. So whenever there are switchings here, there will be sparks which will be flying out here. There will be extra voltage spikes. So this is known as a flyback diode. Okay, flyback diode again, short circuits whenever there is a reverse during switching. There will always be some reverse spikes also, which will spoil your transistor and all. So this is known as a flyback diode. So that essentially short circuits the reverse spikes. So this is how when if you are going to design a circuit, then it is better to use an from the microprocessor. You don't directly connect loads. You always use optocouplers so that your microprocessor remains safe from the switchings which is happening in the output circuit and high voltage switchings. Okay, here you could have a 230 volt system operating and all, whereas this is a 5 volt operating system, and this will totally isolate the microprocessor output pins with the loads which you are going to connect. So you can operate an AC heavy motor using these optocouplers. Again, this switch can again go and again operate an very high rated relays. Okay, if you want to start a heavy motor and all. So, but in the first output of the microprocessor, and the first stage, you need to use an optocoupler. Okay, so this is how we do practical implementations. Okay, so now we have the third question, where the content of two 4-bit registers is to be swapped. The behavior of the register is shown here. The positive going edge of the clock, okay, data will be fed into the register. When a clock pulse is applied at clock input, the input gets stored in the register and is available at the output after 1 millisecond of the rising edge. So that is the propagation delay. Like after 1 millisecond, the output will be available outside. So now we need to swap the contents of R1 and R2, right? So what is the way we need to implement it? So this is how we are going to do it. So this is the register R1, right? And then we are having an R1. So during if you see between R1 and R2, okay, we put an inverted clock. Okay, so otherwise there will be an race around condition, right? What is race around condition? If you don't put an inverted clock and we just give R1 R2, whenever the clock is going high, data of R1 will be fed to R2 and R2 will be fed to R1, right? Again R1 will be fed to R2 and R1 will be, so there could be an a race around condition, right? It will keep the R1 and R2, the data could keep changing as long as the clock is high. So we don't want that to happen. So that is why an inverted clock is given in R1 with respect to R2. So what happens is when the clock is going low, one data from R1 to R2 will be shifted here, and when again the clock is going from low to high, it will be shifted from R1 to R3, and then that is fed back to R1. So in this configuration, we avoid the race around condition. Okay. Is this clear why we need to have it? So it works like essentially like a master slave flip-flop. Okay, that is the reason we are having, we need to have 3 registers like this. Okay, Is this clear to all of you? Is there any doubt? Why?
Sir,
Yeah, tell me.
can you do it once again?
Yeah. See, we need to put the data, swap the data between R1 and R2. If we just use R1 and R2 and if we use the same clock, there could be race around. Like when the positive edge of the clock is going high, whatever is the data available in R1 will come to R2, and whatever is available in R2 will come to R1, right? But if it is an edge triggered register, it's an register, right? So again, whatever is available in R1 will again come back to R2, and then R2 will come to, so it will become an kind of continuously this data will keep shifting from R1 to R2 and R2 to R1. Is that aspect problem understood? What is the problem if connecting just R1 and R2?
Like just R1 and R2 and having a positive clock. Yes, sir, understood.
Yeah, no? So there will be a race around condition. Okay, it will keep toggling and the information will keep rotating between R and. So now what we are going to have is, see, we have put a clock in R2, right? And we have given, there is a dot out here. So there we have given the same clock in R2. In the positive going edge of the clock, what happens is R1 is, you have put an inverter here, right? So during the positive clock time, whatever is the data comes from R2 to R3, whereas nothing because R1 is now in the clock is not available there. So whatever is the data from R2 would come to R3, and when the clock is low, whatever is data from R3 would come to R1, and whatever is there in R2 that will and then whatever is in it will get slaved to R1. Is it okay? When the clock
Okay,
is
sir.
high, whatever is data from R1 would come to R2, from R2 to R3, and then when the clock is low, from R3 it will come to R4. So because you have put an inverted clock here, so there will not be any race around condition. Is it okay?
Okay, sir. Like that is the common clock, no, sir? Like
Yeah,
that
that's
same
a,
clock is being
yeah,
fed. Okay,
yeah.
understood.
It's a clock. There is a dot out here, so that this is an inverted clock which is fed here. Okay. So this is how we swap the data between two registers. So whenever we swap the data using a single clock, we require an additional register, temporary register, to store the data. Right. So in microprocessor programming also, essentially why this is being told is when we write a program, so we will not you can expect it will require 2 clock cycles, right? So in a single command you cannot swap and interchange X, A and B. So that kind of commands will not be available in the microprocessor. It will be move R1, R2, and then in the next command it will could be or you use a temporary file, move R1 to some other register, move R2 to that, and then so you will have to split the commands into maybe 3. When you have to interchange the data, you will have to use one more temporary register and then use 3 commands to interchange the swap the data. You cannot write a single command. It will require more than 1 clock cycles when we are doing the microprocessor programming. Okay. So the next problem is there are 3 registers of 4-bit ABC, and the majority circuit is shown as the block below. Okay, this is the majority circuit. Example. Okay. It says if A and B both are of the same value, then the output should be 5. Otherwise, it should be of the high impedance. Okay. So so this is the circuit. It says it's a majority circuit which we did. Only thing is when we are talking about in microprocessors, we are not talking about a single bit. Okay, A is a register, B is also a register, and C is also a register, right? It is not a single bit. So we are comparing the values of register A with register B. If they are equal, then A and B right? If the contents of A and B or B or C or C and A are equal, then you get that value which is there in equal we require in the output, right? So how to implement that is you have A, B, this is comparing A and B, so you are getting an output AX, which will be and if you are comparing B and C, then the register output will be, if B is equal to C, then the output will be BX. If C is equal to A, the output is equal to CX, and then you are using that AX, BX and CX as a control for an buffer. So if you see, if A is equal to B, AX will be 1. Now it is AX is equal to 1. So you are allowing this A to transfer here, right? Similarly, if B is equal to C, it is BX. So it is BX. So it is you are allowing B to transfer to come out of the buffer. Similarly, if C is equal to A, CX goes high, so CX. So these are all actually registers, okay, not a single. These are also not a single bit. AX, BX, and CX are an single bit flags, and whereas these are all registers. So if you see, this circuit will ensure that whenever two of the values are same, that particular value is coming out of the circuit. Okay, is this implementation clear? Yeah, Suchit, I missed your question. What is the use of R3? Okay, I'll go back to that. But is this circuit clear to all of you? Okay, okay. Okay, so this is the problem, how to implement an A. Now you have one more question. A system is having a 14-bit address with 16 bits of register. Okay, the main memory byte addressable with an access time of 1 nanosecond. How many data lines will be present? If the data bus is of 8 bits, what is the time will be required to load the register? What is the time that will be required if the data bus is 16 bits? Okay, now it says consider a system having 14-bit address. Okay, the address line is 14 bits with 16 bits register, right? So these can be different, right? So each memory element row it's 16-bit data, but a total number of different memory locations will be 2 to the power of 14, right? So so one is total number of data lines is 2 to the power of 14. That means 2 to the power of 14 different memory locations can be accessed if you have an 14-bit address lines. Okay, is it understood why it is 2 to the power of 14? Okay, 14 different, it's a 14-bit address. So 2 to the power of 14 different memory locations can be accessed. 18. Memory, the main memory byte is addressable with an access time of 1 second, 1 nanoseconds. It means 1 nanosecond is the read time or write time. Okay, how many data lines? Okay, data is 2 to the power of 14. If the data is of 8 bits, what is the time that will be required to load an register, right? So to load a register, it is already given that it will take 1 nanosecond. So therefore a total time of if a database is 8 bits, 16 bits can be transferred as chunks of 2 8 bits at an time. Therefore total time is 2 nanosecond, because it says if the data bus is of 8 bits, right, and then if for a transfer of 8 bits you are going to take 1 nanosecond, it is specified here. So here we need to transfer a 16-bit data, so we'll require an 2 clock cycles to transfer that data. So therefore the total time is 2 nanoseconds. Okay, and the last part is what is the total time required if the data bus is 16 nanobits. So if the data bus is of 16 bits, then it will in a single clock cycle we will be able to transmit all the 16 bits. So that is why only one read operation will be required, or a one single write operation, which is 1 nanosecond. So only 1 nanoseconds will be required. So these will be this theory, since the tutorial is slightly ahead of the theory, So it might be a little bit of confusing at this time, but these are pretty simple things. Once we cover the theory aspect, it will be clear, right? So is it understood, this problem? Anybody has got any doubt? No? Okay. So that's all for today, and next tutorial onwards, and we'll be in sync with the theory class. So we'll catch up by next week. We have another 2 classes. So we'll cover up with the theory, and then we'll come into the tutorials will be specific to 8086 and in sync with what is being told in the theory classes. So it will be a little more interesting than what we had today. Okay, thanks a lot for today.
Sir,
Yeah, tell me.
the last problem is something which you were talking about in the theory class, like time multiplexing in microprocessors and all that.
Yeah, we'll slowly do the timing and diagram, and also these things will become clear in the class.
Okay, sir.
Right? Okay. We are not yet covered the theory fully, but in the next week we'll cover this part. And next week onwards, it will be totally in sync with the theory, so there won't be any problems. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.